Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let's talk about Chris Eubank. He delivered. Chris Eubank's victory over Conor Benn. Folks, this was a great fight. Quite frankly, I found it more entertaining than the Beterbiev Bivol rematch, right? Let me also say, too, the scores. I thought Eubank won the fight. I just need for people to understand that Conor Benn had his moments. He looked good at times. He hurt Eubank at times. He cut Eubank. This fight was spirited all the way until the final bell. Let's talk about the styles. I want people to think of the styles as they look at the video, which is now online. The styles made the fight riveting, right? Conor Benn is the better athlete. Conor Benn proved he's the faster athlete, right? Conor Benn is what I call an ambush fighter. By an ambush fighter, the guy's a few feet away from you. He's feinting. He's moving his upper body. He's threatening harm. He's fast. He forces you to guess. If you guess wrong, you're going to get hit with something big. Right? So Conor Benn is outside. Eubank looks slow the first third of the fight, right? Benn's clearly the faster guy. Benn is feinting. Benn's then jumping into the pocket, throwing big shots. Benn, though, doesn't have that Joe Frazier left hook. In other words, when he jumps in the pocket, he doesn't have the Roy Jones left hook. When he jumps in the pocket, he doesn't have the big punch to end the fight. If you guess wrong, you don't protect against the left hook, and he lands it. Right? That's important here. Nor is he a combination puncher. In other words, when Benn jumps in the pocket after feinting, he has one big shot. Right? He might follow it up with another shot. This is different than Ray Leonard, a guy who would jump in the pocket and both hands are going. Right? In other words, you don't know if Ray's throwing a right or a left. He jumps in the pocket. He surprises you. He throws a right hand. Then you're getting machine gunned. Right? He's in the pocket. He's unloading. That's not Conor Benn. Right? Conor Benn is the ambush fighter who comes in, has an ambush, then backs out. Right? His ambush is going to stun you. It's not going to drop you. He doesn't have the fluidity to have both hands blazing. He's not going to compound the mistake you've made by staying in the pocket and finishing you off, right? Hits you with the first punch, you're dazed and confused. By the time you realize what's going on, you've been hit with two other hard punches. That's not Conor Benn. Now let's describe Eubank. Let me also point out, too, that this is an interactive forum. In the comment section, you can agree or disagree with me. Before I move on to analyzing Eubank style, understand, how do you beat an ambush fighter? The answer is by following him after the ambush. Right? I want people to look at Brian Castano against Jermell Charlo, who's an ambush fighter. Right? Charlo comes in, Charlo lands a few punches, Charlo tries to leave after the ambush. Castano, who was front foot heavy, followed him after the ambush. Right? Ambush fighters aren't pocket-centric. They don't know what to do when you bring the pocket to them. Let's talk about Eubank. Now, I've said here for a while that Eubank is one of the best. Right, folks? I personally feel he's one of the best fighters in the entire UK. Not at middleweight. I'm talking about at any weight. Right? Eubank got knocked down once. Liam Smith dropped him. And just understand, that led people to believe that Eubank might have a chin problem. Eubank can get caught. Recognize that that's the only fight in which Eubank hit the canvas. Right? Eubank is what I call a technician. And by a technician, I mean a fighter who has already programmed a set of responses to certain situations once they figure out the lay of the land, once they figure out the angles. Right? So understand, the early rounds, I thought Eubank took the first round. Then I thought he ran into trouble. In the early rounds, Eubank couldn't figure out the timing of Conor Benn. Right? Benn was too quick twitch, too sudden. Right? So Eubank is there, and Eubank looked slow. Eubank had to be a bit tentative at times, even though there is a skill gap in this fight. Right, folks? Eubank's not the better athlete in this fight. But Eubank certainly is the better boxer. Right? As I've said in other videos, boxing's a craft. So, Eubank, who's not the first technician to start slow, right? Think Floyd Mayweather. Think Juan Manuel Marquez. Right? Technicians have to figure out the angles to figure things out. But understand, once Eubank figures out the angles, this fight is over. Right? I know it's fun to watch. I know you're watching the fight and, Conor Benn lands some big shots. Conor Benn looks heroic. Right, folks? The skill gap here is just too big. So let's highlight some of the things, some of the techniques that technician Chris Eubank uses to win this fight. Right? And just hear me out, write down a list, put the video of the fight up, and it'll pop out at you. Right? The first technique, and this is vital. Conor Benn has an excellent chopping right hand. He hurts people with it. It's one of his go-to punches. Right? Now, it's not a knock you out punch, but it's a punch that'll stun you. And if he hits you with it enough times, then he could badly hurt you. Right? It's the kind of punch that stands you up. But what you'll notice in this fight, and it's subtle, and maybe that's why Eubank's not more popular, because parts of his game are subtle. What you'll notice is that Eubank, the bigger man, and he looks much bigger than Conor Benn, the bigger man early in this fight figures out the timing of Conor Benn's chopping right hand to the point where he's able to duck under it. So you'll notice Conor Benn comes over. He's an ambush fighter. He's programmed to throw some quick punch when he jumps in the pocket. He jumps in the pocket. He throws this chopping right hand, and Eubank is below it. He's not even leaning away from it. He's actually leaning in the pocket toward Conor Benn. Conor Benn can't land that chopping right with any kind of regularity. Chris Eubank has taken that weapon away from him. Understand, too, and we talk about skill gap here, right? Conor Benn has a lot of movement toward you, doesn't have a lot of lateral movement, can't fight you on his back foot, right? So understand what starts happening. Eubank knows Conor Benn is not going to try to win rounds on his back foot, right? This is a big hole in Conor Benn's game, right? Think about, as you're watching an exciting fight, think about what you're not seeing. So Eubank has a move, and it's a bit incredible, quite frankly. He has a move where Conor Benn tries an ambush, and Eubank is able to clinch him with one arm. This happens repeatedly in the fight. It actually starts upsetting the referee, who starts giving Eubank grief. Right? Eubank just knew how, with one hand, against a hyper-aggressive younger guy who's a better athlete. Eubank, the technician, understood in certain situations, he didn't even have to throw punches back. He could just put Conor Benn's head in a headlock with his left arm. Right, folks? Look at the film of the fight. This is a key tactic for Chris Eubank. Right? Understand, Conor Benn, because he's too front foot centric, because he's not Jaron Ennis, right? A guy who keeps you guessing. Front foot, back foot, lean, no lean, lean forward. Right here you understood. Conor Benn, for all the feints outside, he's going to jump in the pocket. Right? He's fighting an older guy who's slower, but he doesn't have the skill set to be on his back foot and to shoot a jab and to win what I call slow rounds. So as he's jumping in the pocket like a matador, Chris Eubank is jamming him up with clinches. And Eubank has him timed eventually to the point where he's not using two hands on the clinch. Let me name another thing that folks have to look out for. That left hand that Eubank is using to clinch Conor Benn religiously, Eubank is throwing a wicked left hook. It's wicked. Now, Conor Benn has a poker face, right? Conor Benn's strategy is to get hit with big shots and not blink, right? He doesn't stagger. That's a skill I'm sure he's had to work on. But folks, he's getting hit with home run left hooks. Right? Now, the two guys keep talking. Whenever they get together to clinch, they're talking. Right? I have no doubt. Not having a mic up and hearing what's being said, I have no doubt that Eubank was telling him, hey man, you're getting hit with left hooks, aren't you? You can't avoid that punch. You can't make adjustments, can you? Right? That left hook becomes a bigger and bigger factor as the fight progresses. Take a look at it. The other thing, too, is punch variety. Right? Eubank two-handed. This is the righty who's landing home run left hooks. Right? This is the righty who can throw a chopping right hand, but can also fold it and hit you in the body with it, throw uppercuts, right? You don't know what punch Eubank's going to throw. Conor Benn, by contrast, is throwing a chopping right hand. Eubank's ducking under it. Conor Benn can't make the adjustment to throw a right uppercut. In fact, in the 8th round on the telecast, the announcers, this is the zone telecast, the announcers actually start saying that the uppercut is there, right, for Conor Benn. The uppercut is there. But understand, Eubank can throw punches in the flow and make adjustments because he's a technician. Conor Benn can't make the adjustment to throw the uppercut against a tall guy who's literally bending over the pocket right in front of him. Right, so just understand, and it's a hallmark of Chris Eubank. Eubank is two-handed. He can hurt you with either hand. Right, Eubank's throwing jabs. He's even throwing jabs to Conor Benn's body. Right, Eubank has the timing down where as he throws the jab to Conor Benn's body, he knows Conor Benn doesn't have the timing to hit him over the low jab with a chopping right hand. Then when Conor Benn throws chopping right hands, Eubank is superior defensively. He's able to duck under it. Let me say too, just in terms of counterpunching, right? Conor Benn is great since he's an ambush fighter as a lead puncher, right? He's outside, he jumps in the pocket with a punch. Eubank, more developed game, right? More high-level fights, older guy, more experience, right? Eubank is throwing ridiculous counters. In other words, Conor Benn throws a chopping right hand, Eubank ducks under it, Eubank then leans up, Eubank's throwing stuff. Right? Eubank's rhythm is more developed than Conor Benn's rhythm. In other words, once Conor Benn throws a right hand that doesn't land, he pauses for a second. It's Eubank who's filling the gaps. So the older guy, and I'm not saying the fight wasn't competitive, but I understand the judges, right, who had Eubank winning 8-4, which isn't that close. All three judges. Right, just understand that after a Conor Benn miss, Eubank is throwing a bunch of shots, and they're diverse shots. Right, Eubank starts loading up on right hands as the fight progresses. Of course, he's still dangerous with that left. And of course, he's synced. So he can use his left to just tie up Conor Benn when he needs. Now, the real eye catcher, apart from the third round where you saw the clear speed advantage that Conor Benn had, was Eubank making a decision, and it's jarring, in the 8th round to fight small. Right? Now, Conor Benn is a little bit too upright. In other words, the difference between himself and Joe Frazier, another guy who uses feints and bob and weave, is Joe Frazier's actually in a crouch. Right? It's hard to find Joe Frazier. Joe Frazier understood that he's the shorter guy, and he's going to leverage that by bending at the waist, being even smaller. Right here, Conor Benn is more upright. That's his center of gravity. Right? Conor Benn isn't a bender at the waist. He's not fighting small. So you know who starts to fight small, folks? It's a jaw dropper. It's Chris Eubank. This starts in the 8th round. In other words, Eubank, who can fight on his back foot if he wants, knows his way around the pocket and can stay in the pocket, unlike Conor Benn. Eubank decides he's going to go front foot. He's going to fight low. So, folks, the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th rounds, 5 rounds of this fight, have the bigger guy fighting low, coming forward on his front foot, chasing the ambush fighter, forcing Conor Benn to be on his back foot, where Conor Benn's effectiveness drops by, let's say, 40 or 50%. So the last 5 rounds are a slog of Chris Eubank deciding to fight small and very front foot to back up Conor Benn. And Eubank, of course, is able to shorten his punches because he's Chris Eubank. Right? So that left hook he's able to throw from distance. Now suddenly, this is what technicians do. He's fighting small. He has the shorter guy in front of him. He's nullified Conor Benn's speed. Right? Conor Benn's legs are not an issue once Eubank decides to fight small. And he's crowding Conor Benn, and he's beating Conor Benn in an in-the-pocket fight. Right? The last 5 rounds, it might as well have been Roberto Duran in the ring. Right? Eubank is fighting small. Eubank mauls Conor Benn. 12th round's interesting because Conor Benn gets hit with some shots, and you realize Conor Benn, the better athlete, had nowhere to go. In other words, there isn't a moment in this fight where Conor Benn is circling and he's keeping a distance and he's making Eubank pay for trying to come forward. Right? Conor Benn, who has a jab, just doesn't have a jab he can use against this level of opponent. Right? So let's just say Conor Benn's a better athlete. I'm not going to dispute that. The guys have a rematch clause at middleweight. And of course, Eubank showed a problem making weight. Right? But here's the problem I see. You saw a learning curve here. Conor Benn's best moments really are rounds 2, 3, and 4, aren't they? Right? Those are his best moments. At that point, you had a question out there. Who's winning the fight? Right? The problem is the technician cracked the code in the second half of the fight. Right? Conor Benn is not going to be able to suddenly pick up a back foot between now and a rematch. Right? Eubank now knows I have the option, if I want, of fighting small. Right? Eubank knows he can duck under Conor Benn's chopping right hand. Since Eubank's a technician, I'm sure he probably had a plan B just in case Conor Benn figured out that he could fake with that chopping right hand and actually throw uppercuts instead. So I would expect a rematch to be even more of a Chris Eubank victory. Right? Let me also say this about Eubank. He's going to get beaten eventually by Father Time. Right? He's well into his 30s right now. You saw the difference between an older fighter who's slowing down physically and a younger Conor Benn in the early rounds. Right? But folks, if you're looking at skills, when you see Chris Eubank able to tie up Conor Benn with one hand repeatedly in clinches, right? When you see Chris Eubank able to, throw and land an excellent left hook and then have the right hand cocked. Later in the fight, he actually starts throwing his own right uppercut. When you see him able to bend against a shorter, more athletic opponent and actually fight small and lower than his opponent, then you should realize that you're dealing with a more skilled KG vet here. Right? He got hit with some shots. But folks, he pulls away from, quite frankly, an energized, inspired Conor Benn as this fight went along. Right? Understand, too, Again, he got hit by Liam Smith. The announcers were talking about how Conor Benn needed to try to throw a left hook. That seems to be more effective against Chris Eubank. Right? A left hook, then his right hand. That should tell you how controlled Conor Benn's right hand was by Chris Eubank. Right? Eubank took away the best parts of Conor Benn's game. Right? Take a look at Conor Benn against Chris Algieri. You're going to notice Conor Benn's legs. He's outside. Then he jumps in the pocket and hits Algieri. Right? But you don't see him able to fight off his back foot. Right? He has athleticism, but it's really used for ambushes. Right? That fact by itself makes him vulnerable against a boxer as skilled as Chris Eubank, who can fight back foot. Look at his fight against Avni Yildirim. Can fight front foot, is naturally better defensively. Right? Just look at how he's able to hide his head throughout the fight. And of course, is two-handed and knows how to hurt you. I thought the referee was a bit too active in this fight. Right? He keeps warning Eubank for things that he shouldn't warn Eubank for. Looked like he was upset with the way Eubank was grabbing Conor Benn's head. Right, folks? Clinching's legal in boxing, isn't it? If Conor Benn doesn't know how to prevent the clinching, and Conor Benn should have had a hand up or should have been better with spacing, right? Should have had it so an elbow's in the way. Maybe should have mixed up his offense a little bit more if he could, to avoid Eubank from cutting the distance and clinching him. Right? I'm grateful that in a fight this good, the referee did not deduct a point from Chris Eubank. Right? I thought the ref was too active. I thought Eubank pulled away from Conor Benn. I think Conor Benn is a young, promising guy, but he just doesn't have the size of toolbox that Chris Eubank has. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Let me also say, too, that this is the kind of fight Eubank lives for. He's unique in boxing. Right? This is a guy who you get the feeling doesn't really want the championship. He just wants the paydays. He just wants, to have fights like tonight where there are a lot of people in the crowd. It's energized. There's trash talk. I would have preferred if Eubank was competitive and sportsmanlike enough to actually touch gloves at the beginning of the fight. Or at the end of the fight, realizing that he's beaten a younger fighter. Right? To actually go over to, Conor Benn right at the end of the fight instead of immediately turning away. Right? But in my opinion, those are the moments Eubank lives for. Right? Because Eubank likes to compete. Eubank doesn't like to be told what to do. But I need for people to understand that this remains, in his mid-30s, one of the most dangerous middleweights on the planet. Let me go one step further. 168, we'll see what happens. Benavidez is no longer there. Right? Fighters like Jamal Charlo, who knows what he has left? Canelo is fighting guys who haven't fought above, 154 pounds. Right? Assuming he gets by William Skull, who, they tell you on the telecast, sparred with Conor Benn, and if you believe the telecast, got beaten up in sparring by Conor Benn. Right? If I'm Chris Eubank, and if I really can't lose a few ounces, and I'm paying, stiff weight penalty fines, why wouldn't I think about 168? Eubank's already been there right? Eubank against now granted, he's complicated, against a Diego Pacheco, right? If you could figure out how to deal with Pacheco's length, you might be able to do something against him, right? Eubank Canelo, let's stop kidding ourselves. That would be a fight between two cagey vets. There'd be a lot of savvy in that fight, right? Eubank wouldn't be able to know with confidence that he can duck under Canelo's right hand like he knows with confidence from early on in this fight that he can duck under Conor Benn's right hand. Understand, too, Canelo has a home run punch. Canelo's left hook is one of the best punches in boxing. Right here against Conor Benn, Eubank knew he could take the punch. I'm not sure if anybody knows they could take Canelo's punch. Right? Eubank has some thinking to do. Let's just say, if Eubank is just into the adventure of boxing, being a world-class fighter and having skills, 168 looks like it could set up some interesting opportunities for him, and he wouldn't have to cut weight like he just did for this match. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours, agreeing or disagreeing, in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.